in the center of Galveston Island. We're at the core of the island now, right? And so as we talked about before, the core of Galveston Island here is a bunch of these sand ridges. So we can kind of see those sand ridges right here really nicely. Because this has not been bulldozed and taken over by subdivisions. It's actually some sort of preserve. Actually, I'm not too sure who the signs are here or whatever, but they're leaving it in natural context, which is very nice. And you can see here that actually out this way, you can see that's a ridge, right? And so it's got different vegetation on it. It's a little wetter, better drained, so larger plants and bushes and stuff can grow on it. And then it comes down into a swale, a little low point, and it actually has a little bit of a bayou there going on there. A little tidal inlet actually hooks up to a tidal inlet that goes around behind. That used to be one of those washover channel things that would go up when it was shorter. But what we see as we drive back, and you can see here, is that you have over there different vegetation, right? A little bit higher. Then you come down into this low, then we go up into another higher, another ridge, then beyond that we go down and low again. And as we drive back out of here again and back to the main road, you will see a number of these different vegetations and a number of these ridges and swales going on. This is the core of the island. This is what built up Galveston Island and made it prograde. There's so much sand that it could plaster all these little sand ridges that washover deposits couldn't get over. The storm surges would come up and just plaster more sand on the beach ridge instead of making it wash over into the back barrier island environment like we saw on Fullerton.
That's significantly higher. I mean, that's a good 5 feet higher
yes.
or more than
yeah.
that ridge.
Yeah, so and I think Mitchell Ridge in the back is the highest point. So yeah, gotta get your subtle, very subtle. There's subtle features ish, but once you get your eye in on them, it's like, oh no, there's a big difference, yeah, right, going on. And like I said, these things are about 30 to 70 meters apart, right? And they're not regular, equidistance apart, but they're around, average of 50 meters apart. So for whatever reason, every 50 meters or so, another ridge kind of formed and then been built up through time. And you can see that I haven't actually counted how many there are, but there's a dozen or so or more ridges as we drive back out again. And you just look outside the windows, you will see ridge, swale, ridge, swale, ridge, swale, ridge, swale, and you'll get your eye on them, and the vegetation really shows it. Now we've gone in through here and we've tried to do some little push cores on both the ridges and the swales, and as you can imagine, it's mostly sand.
Nothing but sand.
Nothing but sand. Yeah, that was some of the original efforts when we came out here, when we first started coming out here. It was like doing some push cores and making Emery do it and getting all his body weight in there, and wasn't going down much farther. Exactly. Well, and we have to jump the fence and stuff here, so it's not quite as nice. So, all right, some more cars coming. Each world of Fullerton Island, all right, and we still had the same microtidal environment. We still had the same, wave action coming on through here, but the biggest difference is sediment supply. And so that made the difference in the overall shape and style of this barrier island.
Is all the San Jacinto River there?
A lot of it is, yeah, coming down to San Jacinto and, some coming down to San Jacinto and Trinity, coming through Galveston Bay, because that's all in Size Valley system through there, coming down through there. But then it's also cannibalizing a little bit of that offshore shoals and sand as well, coming in through here. Now I think in the back, when you look at the very, go back to that little spreadsheet. And so if you do a sand ridge cored island, which is 1,400 square acres, now you're looking at 350 million barrels. So Galveston Island is a 350 million barrel field. So not too bad. Or if you want, you can put in almost a TCF of gas. So that's kind of the equivalent. So when you hear a TCF of gas or 300 million barrels, Galveston Island, that's the size of it. That's the shape, the size and the aerial extent, and that's just putting like 50 feet of reservoir, and it's probably much more than that. So if you put 100 feet of reservoir in here, now you're talking 700 million barrels. Because down in the subsurface, I mean, this will go sand ridges piled against sand ridges piled against sand ridges, so there's not much baffles and barriers as it's prograding out. So horizontal barriers, there's probably not quite so much. Underneath it, it's probably some mud, something. maybe. I'm not sure actually what's underneath. Yeah, because it's probably a back barrier island or something as it's prograding out. And then eventually it's going to get covered up by offshore mud. You know, as sea level rises up again.
Very cool.
So this. So here we are at the end of the seawall. The seawall was built from the late 50s, early 60s. It ended up in like the late 60s, early 70s was when it was finished. So it took, 15 years or so. I can't remember. Look it up. To actually build this sucker. They don't allow major structures like this to be built anymore because, well, yes, it does protect, but you can see as we came up here, we actually drove up a little hill because this is the highest point of Galveston Island now, right? They built this up enough to protect Galveston as, from the natural disaster that they had in 1901, which killed 6,000 people, and then more storms came through. And so they thought, well, let's just build something that won't erode. And it doesn't. It doesn't erode. I mean, natural processes are occurring here. This is still eroding away. It's just going to take much, much, much longer than the natural beach sands and dunes that were here, right? But they don't do it because it really alters the system. And you can see that. Do we have a beach here? No, there is no beach here. When you build seawalls like this, you can't maintain a beach because the beach naturally has longshore drift and other things like that, but because you're not allowing the beach to naturally erode back, you are now making that front where it is, and all the sand now, and especially here, because as longshore drift is coming around, you are now getting refraction of the waves, and you can actually see the waves kind of refracting around, and they're focusing in at this point, at the end of the seawall. You can actually see that today because you actually have a little bit of curve. The beach goes in the farthest right at this point, and then it actually curves back out to where we're standing. We're way in the distance. So actually, we're seeing the effect just on the beach here itself. If you look at the very back of the field guide on page 71, it starts where we're standing, and you can see where it was previous to the seawall came in. But on page 73, they took a bunch of satellite photos that have right before Hurricane Ike, right immediately after Hurricane Ike, and then more or less just like last year. And you can see the devastation that Hurricane Ike did right here at this point. It pushed the beach back almost to the road. That hotel was almost gone. That's been totally rebuilt. That hotel was gone and now totally rebuilt. So the seawall focused in the surge and all that wave action right to this point, and it really pushed it back through there. Yeah. Also what it did is, now you can see that's brand new. That wasn't there before. They just made that hill there. Before, you can see on page 72, there used to be a little bluff there. That was like there 4 years ago. And it was like the beach kind of eroding back into the back beach, foreshore, dune kind of area and stuff. So since Hurricane Ike had built out some more sands and some beaches, then eroded it back in, and now we've built it back out again ourselves. But we can also tell, but you can still see a little bit of layering, some different coloring. But we know this is rapid erosion because at the very base there's that little white thing. That's a bottle cap. So just like the dunes that we saw in San Luis, you can date it by the plastic in it, right? So again, rapid deposition, but rapid erosion as well. So so it's amazing things get preserved in the rock record, but they do, right? Because something happens in one spot, then something covers it up and preserves it, and other things take it away. At one point, when they built when they finished the seawall for a number of years after, into the late 70s, there was a ramp right here that you could drive down onto the beach. So the beach used to be here, but because the seawall is now jutting out so far, it's because the beach has eroded back this far. So now what they try to do and what they have to do here is, as we go back along, you'll see lots of groins and other things that stick out into the water, and that's to try to capturing the sand and try to capture longshore drift as we come along. Of course, if it's something in front that captures all the sand, then the people behind it, they lose their beach and that sort of stuff. And so there's been lots of efforts in beach replenishment, and you can read about it. And what they do is they're dredging out Bolivar Roads, which is the channel in between Bolivar Peninsula and Galveston Island. They dredge that out to keep it open, and there's a sand supply out there. As they dredge it, they put it into a pipe. They put in a little slurry flow. They make a little slurry flow, a slurry, and put it into a pipe, and then to bring that sand down the beach and deposit it onto Galveston, the beaches in front of Galveston. And to the tune of like $30 million efforts to keep the beaches at Galveston. And as you go along, you'll see they're not really good beaches. I'm not too sure if they're $30 million beaches or not, but hey, that's what it takes just to have a beach. So as we drive back along, you'll see the beach kind of coming back a little bit, and then in between these other features that we try to stick out into the water to interrupt longshore drift, that will also preserve some of the beach itself. Not very good. It doesn't work very well. We're at least getting a little bit better at it, because at least we'll stick the sand at the top of the beach and let longshore drift distribute it so it lasts a little bit longer. What they used to do, and I've seen it a couple years ago, they built this whole area out, and they trucked in sand here, made a really nice beach for about half a mile out to about this point through here. A few months later when I came, it was gone. It was all gone. Right? So, but that sand was distributed along the rest of the beach. So I mean, we're getting better at it. We're trying to work with the natural processes instead of trying to fight against it, because we will lose. We will lose against it. But we get what we can. So we're getting a little bit better at it. So you can see how this, the natural processes here are still occurring. It can't erode as much because now we got all this, Central Texas granite, and there's all the cement and stuff, but it will erode that eventually. This will eventually be an island because it will come around and erode all that stuff that's easier. But yeah, all these natural processes are still occurring even after we do and try to muck up the system. And so we're changing the timing of things, but everything is still occurring, going on. All right, so any questions about anything we've seen today, about what we see here, about anything else we got going on that we saw today?
Instead of
the thing is do not make any low breaks for washover to occur. So everything has to go over the dunes. So preserve your dunes. That's your natural barrier to erosion. And then don't interrupt the sand supply. All right, that's the two biggest things. Is we're interrupting the sand supply, and we're making it easier for waves and everything to erode back into the system and push everything back. But again, if sea level's rising, man, you can't do much about that. Right. So again, it's just modifying what we have and preparing for what's eventually going to come.
So in time, at sea level rise, how much higher do you think it'll get? And what'll happen? Galveston will just get pushed back, or
Galveston will be buried, and some of the sand will get attached to the mainland. And then eventually, I mean, it depends on how sea high. I mean, what's the elevation of Houston? It's around like
60, 70.
yeah.
Is it that high?
I live in Sugar Land, 75 feet.
Okay, so 75 feet.
The east side, I'm sure, is in the 50s or something.
Yeah, I think the height is like 55 feet in Houston. So yeah, so we're running between, Pearland and stuff, 45 feet back up to the woodlands, which is now maybe over 100 feet. So you get 30 feet of sea level rise. This is underwater, So, and then the shoreline is at front of your house.
Front property. I'm not selling.
So, yeah. So, again, so that's what I'm saying. So back in Freeport, we're with all that billions and billions of dollars of processing plants. They're going to spend a lot of money to try to build up 25, 30 feet of levees to preserve that, because to build a new plant at 100 feet is $10 billion. So there's a little bit of effort of maybe all the new infrastructure needs to get built higher, but then it's far away from current transportation access. So that's why I'm not
readily right outside their levees.
Eventually, yeah. Eventually,
That'll
well,
save them.
Yeah. So it's all trade-off. Thank God I'm not a business guy. I just tell people to drill here. Well, there's the Ike Dike going in here, and it's still